Planet of the Humans is quite simply one of the greatest documentaries I've ever seen in my entire life. Many people are aware of the consequences of peak oil, peak natural gas, peak coal, and so on, but few are aware of the consequences of peak green. And that's where this movie comes in. It talks about the environmental consequences of wind turbine plants, solar power plants, and biofuel. And just how unsustainable it is, and how essentially it's lobbying spiraling itself to death. It's not economically sustainable. It's not energetically sustainable. It is something where you have literally billion-dollar industries which are being given that are lobbying the government to give them money to give them back something which is completely unsustainable, both environmentally in terms of the destruction that's caused through the mining and deforestation and so on, and in terms of energy because it's far, far less efficient than natural gas and coal and oil, which everybody and their dog should know. But, you know, if you look to all these countries like Germany and Canada, and Arjun was doing this when he was arguing to me about this. I don't want to kick him right now, but I guess I did because I'm doing this off the cuff. But, you know, Canada's really actually is, you know, getting sustainable. It's getting green. Well, no, it's not. It's a big giant meme. Every single renewable resource needs natural resources, and there's no such thing as a renewable resource by definition. Every single thing, every single machinery has a peak in it. So this definitely goes down the limits to growth path. Of course, they never even talk about nuclear, but that's to be suspected. A lot of people on the right, which read into this kind of thing, environmentalism, will say, well, why don't we have nuclear? But they forget about the problem, the ultimate antithesis to the human race, which they believe, despite massive destruction it brings to their life, which is eugenics. And, human biodiversity, and the fact that the global G is declining rapidly, right? So they're talking about the population bomb, but the population bomb is toothless, right? It's toothless unless you talk about human biodiversity. And that's kind of, it doesn't fall into this, and the guy's not brave enough to talk about this, but he just basically ends the documentary being like, well, we just gotta cut back. But that's impossible. You can never have any government, ever, not even the most totalitarian government, force people to cut back. So you're just growing indefinitely until you hit peak everything. And you've lost your intelligence through massive dysgenics brought about by the sexual revolution, brought about by neoliberalism and open borders and so on and so forth, that you're building the scaffolding for a higher and higher fall, indefinitely accelerating it until you get to the collapse scenario, right? Doom spaghetti. Now this movie is, 6 out of 10 of this doom spaghettis, but it doesn't go into the collapse of human capital, peak human capital. And when peak human capital happens and when you get a decline of G, what happens afterward, in that you cannot ever put these genies back in the bottle. You're going to be having all these nuclear plants and all these solar plants, which are these fucking dead zones of pollution, sitting there for centuries to thousands of years, right? A world of Chernobyls as mankind jumps its last gasp to maintain industrial civilization. It builds every last nuclear reactor it can before it turns completely retarded, and it's immersed in endless wars, in a final decline that makes the collapse of the Han and Roman empires a fleeting joke. But I really, really suggest this movie because it will give you 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 of the doom spaghetti worldview. The inevitability of the collapse of industrialization, which is coming in the next 100 to 200 years. Probably maybe within 50 to 100 years, but we could maybe extend it 200 years out. And just how unstoppable, uncurvable this is. So, this is a pretty outstanding movie. Michael Moore executive produced it. Michael Moore obviously sometimes makes really, really bad movies, as somebody who's economically left-wing or believes in environmental and stuff, but is socially right-wing. Obviously, I don't agree with him. A lot of times I really like Roger and Me. He's getting shredded for this. And a big part about this movie is that it's billion-dollar corporations which are essentially moving money around. So that's not surprising at all that he's getting shredded for it. But definitely, it's free on YouTube. Go see it. Give it a likes up. Great movie. The best and highest produced movie I've ever seen about the limits to growth.